When you stop reaching out, the first and most powerful thing that happens in a man's mind is reflection. Not immediately and not in a dramatic way, but slowly, quietly, and deeply. Men are not naturally reflective when everything is comfortable. As long as communication is flowing and attention is guaranteed, there is no internal pressure to think. Your messages, your calls, your presence keep his mind occupied without requiring effort. But the moment that stops, his mind is forced to fill the silence on its own. At first, he may not notice it consciously. He might go about his day as usual, telling himself that nothing has changed. But habits don't disappear quietly. When he reaches for his phone and there's no notification from you, something subtle happens. His brain pauses. That pause is important. It's the beginning of awareness. He becomes aware of your absence, not because you announced it, but because it disrupted a routine his mind had grown used to. Silence creates space, and space is dangerous for unprocessed emotions. Without your voice or messages guiding the emotional rim, his thoughts begin to wander. He starts replaying past moments, not because he wants to, but because his mind is searching for meaning. Men often avoid emotional reflection by staying busy or distracted. Silence removes the distraction. Now there's nothing external to focus on, so his mind turns inward. He begins to ask himself questions he never bothered to ask before. Not all at once and not always clearly, but they come. Why hasn't she reached out? Did I say something wrong? Did I take her for granted? Is she pulling away or is she protecting herself? These questions are not about control. They are about uncertainty. And uncertainty forces thought. When a man doesn't know where he stands, his mind doesn't rest. Reflection is uncomfortable for men because it exposes emotional gaps they didn't know existed. He may realize that he enjoyed your attention more than he admitted. He may recognize that your presence brought stability, warmth, or motivation into his life. These realizations don't come as romantic thoughts at first. They come as disturbances, a sense that something is slightly off, that his day feels quieter, that something is missing, even if he can't yet name it. As time passes, reflection deepens. He starts connecting emotional dots. He remembers moments where you supported him, challenged him, or believed in him. And now that you're silent, those memories stand alone without new ones to replace them. The mind naturally compares before and after. Before there was consistency. Now there is absence. That contrast sharpens perception. He doesn't just remember you. He evaluates what life feels like without you. This is where real emotional processing begins. A man starts to realize that your value wasn't in what you said every day, but in how your presence made him feel over time. Reflection transforms casual connection into emotional awareness. And awareness is the gateway to attachment. You don't have to remind a man of your worth when silence gives him the chance to discover it himself. Reflection also challenges his ego. When you stop reaching out, you remove reassurance. Men are more sensitive to loss of validation than they let on. He may wonder if he has already lost you. That thought lingers. And when it lingers, it forces him to examine his behavior. Did he show up enough? Did he invest emotionally? Did he assume you would always be there? Reflection holds up a mirror, and not every man likes what he sees. Some men resist this process. They try to distract themselves, stay busy, avoid thinking. But reflection has a way of returning, especially at night or during quiet moments. When distractions fade, thoughts return stronger. Silence follows him into those moments. And in that silence, he feels the weight of possibility that he misjudged the situation, or that he might lose something meaningful because he didn't act. This kind of reflection changes perspective. He no longer sees you as someone who is always available. He starts seeing you as someone with boundaries, depth, and self-respect. That shift is crucial. Men value what requires effort. and intention. Reflection teaches him that your presence was not guaranteed, and that realization alone changes how he views you. Whether he chooses to act or not, reflection has already done its work. It has shifted his internal narrative. He is no longer passive. He is aware. He is thinking. And when a man starts thinking deeply about a woman in her absence, that is when emotional truth begins to surface. Silence didn't push him away. It forced him to confront what he truly feels. When you stop reaching out, something else happens in a man's mind that is equally powerful. And that is the realization of absence and the emotional value it carries. Men are wired to respond to what they might lose more than what they already have. When your presence is constant, your attention is guaranteed, and your messages are frequent, it is easy for a man to take you for granted, even without realizing it. He doesn't question your importance because it is always visible and always available. But when you step back and stop reaching out, you create a vacuum. And that vacuum forces him to pay attention in a way he never had to before. At first, he may not admit to himself that your absence matters. He might distract himself with work, friends, hobbies, or entertainment. He might tell himself, "It's fine, I'm busy. It doesn't matter." But distraction only delays reflection, it doesn't erase it. The human mind has a way of noticing what is missing. And once a pattern of attention disappears, he starts noticing small things. He notices he doesn't have a message to look forward to. He doesn't have someone checking in on him. He doesn't have that voice that added a sense of comfort or excitement. That void starts to make an impression even if he tries to ignore it. As days go by, absence begins to create contrast. When he compares life with you in it and life without your regular communication, the difference becomes apparent. Your presence was not just habitual, it carried emotional weight. He starts to feel the difference emotionally before he can even put it into words. He realizes that your attention was not ordinary, it was meaningful. And that realization often comes as a shock, because he may have assumed that your care or concern would always be there. Absence teaches the mind that what was once taken for granted is actually valuable, and it cannot be replaced with just anything else. A man begins to replay memories in his mind, noticing little things he didn't appreciate before. He remembers your smile, your laughter, the way your voice sounded, the times you made him feel understood or supported. These memories stand out more vividly because they are no longer reinforced by new interactions. Absence amplifies their significance. A man may find himself longing for the reassurance, comfort, or excitement you brought, and that longing is the mind's way of measuring emotional value. It is learning that what is gone cannot be taken lightly. Absence also forces a man to evaluate his own behavior. He starts asking himself whether he did enough, whether he truly appreciated what he had, whether he allowed moments to pass without recognizing their importance. Men often avoid this kind of internal audit when things are always comfortable, but when silence replaces constant communication, reflection begins naturally. He begins to understand that a relationship is not just about presence, but about awareness, care, and effort. And suddenly the absence of your attention highlights any lack that may have existed on his part. Another important effect of absence is that it triggers a sense of urgency. When attention is guaranteed, there is no rush. When the mind knows that love, care, or presence is always accessible, it feels secure. And men can unconsciously postpone emotional investment. But once attention is absent, the brain starts to recognize scarcity. Scarcity creates focus. The very thing that is missing becomes the object of mental energy. And the more he thinks about it, the more he begins to recognize its importance. He starts noticing how life feels less complete without your presence. And this emotional awareness motivates him to reconsider his priorities and actions. Absence also teaches emotional patience. A man may feel conflicted between wanting to reach out immediately and respecting the fact that you have pulled back. That tension makes him think harder about his true feelings. Is he acting from habit or from genuine care? Is his desire to reconnect about convenience, or is it about meaningful connection? The mental processing that happens in the absence of your messages brings clarity. It separates surface-level attraction from deep appreciation, and that is a critical shift in perception. At the same time, absence triggers a heightened sense of value in what he already has experienced. Men may begin to understand that your presence, your attention, your care, and your communication were not just habitual, but exceptional. He notices the difference between someone who simply exists in his life and someone whose presence impacts his thoughts, his moods, and his emotional balance. This recognition is a direct result of absence because it provides the contrast necessary for the mind to appreciate what was once overlooked. When a man finally acknowledges this value, his behavior often changes. He may begin to act with more intention, whether reaching out thoughtfully, making efforts to connect, or demonstrating appreciation in ways he hadn't before. Absence has shifted the dynamic from passive existence to active recognition. You no longer need to remind him of your worth. He begins to see it on his own. The mind naturally moves toward protecting it, pursuing what it now identifies as rare and meaningful. The emotional value created by absence is also reinforced over time. Every day without constant communication strengthens the sense of what was lost or what is missing. Memories become sharper, feelings more distinct, and awareness grows. He begins to internalize the idea that your presence is not something that will always be available. That realization is powerful because it motivates reflection, action, and emotional investment. Without reaching out, you allow him to reach clarity on his own terms. And that clarity often reveals the depth of his feelings in ways no conversation could force. Ultimately, absence teaches a man to recognize and honor emotional value. It forces him to consider not only what you bring into his life, but also what he stands to lose. It triggers thought, reflection, and self-evaluation. It shifts perception from taking things for granted to appreciating the significance of your presence. And it reminds him that emotional connection is not a constant entitlement. It is earned, nurtured, and respected. By stepping back, you create space for this realization to occur naturally, allowing him to discover the worth of your attention, your care, and your presence in a way that constant outreach could never achieve. When you stop reaching out, another powerful shift begins in a man's mind, and that is the activation of desire through uncertainty. Men by nature are wired differently than women when it comes to emotional attachment. Women often connect and deepen feelings through consistent communication and shared experiences. Men, on the other hand, often connect most strongly when they are required to evaluate, reflect, and recognize value for themselves. When you suddenly pull back and stop reaching out, you create uncertainty. And uncertainty is a powerful emotional trigger for desire. It forces him to pay attention in ways he never did when everything was guaranteed. At first, this uncertainty can feel uncomfortable to him. Men do not like situations where they are unsure of their standing or their influence. He may initially feel confused or frustrated. Thoughts like, did I do something wrong? Or is she losing interest? Begin to surface. This discomfort is crucial because it pushes his mind to engage in a process he might normally avoid. It awakens a level of introspection that constant communication suppresses. When a man is challenged by uncertainty, he begins to examine not only your actions, but his own. He starts evaluating how he feels about you, what he wants, and what your absence means to him. Uncertainty also heightens emotional focus. When he no longer knows where he stands, his mind cannot remain neutral or passive. He starts thinking about the times he felt connected to you, the way you made him feel, and the energy that your presence brought into his life. Small memories that may have seemed trivial before now become significant. A laugh you shared, a message you sent, a moment of support or encouragement. All of these resurface in his thoughts, often repeatedly, because your attention is no longer readily available. Each memory carries greater emotional weight. It's as if your absence magnifies the value of your presence, and he begins to notice the things he once took for granted. Desire grows when a man senses that something important is not guaranteed. Men often pursue most vigorously what they feel could be lost. By not reaching out, you create a subtle tension. He is no longer sure if he will get the attention, affection, or connection he once experienced. That tension awakens motivation. He begins to ask himself, sometimes unconsciously, whether he is willing to put in the effort to reconnect, to prove himself, or to pursue what he now recognizes as significant. This is why uncertainty is so potent. It transforms his mindset from complacency to action-oriented reflection. As he wrestles with uncertainty, a man also begins to imagine different scenarios. He considers how life would feel if your attention were no longer a part of his routine. He asks himself questions that test his emotions. Do I want her back in my life? Am I willing to make changes to earn her attention? Do I appreciate what I had enough to not let it slip away? These mental exercises may start subtly, but over time they strengthen emotional clarity. By confronting the possibility of loss, he begins to distinguish between superficial attraction and genuine desire. Uncertainty makes him examine the depth of his feelings without any external prompting. This internal processing often leads to subtle changes in his behavior. He may start observing you more closely, paying attention to details he hadn't noticed before. He may reflect on conversations you had, moments where he didn't fully understand your perspective, or times where he didn't express appreciation adequately. The mind is naturally drawn to patterns and causes, and uncertainty triggers him to analyze what made your connection meaningful. Every memory, every thought, every reflection builds desire because it reminds him that your presence is rare and significant. Uncertainty also amplifies emotional investment. When things are predictable and constant, men can remain emotionally passive. But when your presence is uncertain, he must actively engage to understand it. He begins to anticipate, wonder, and hope for communication or reconnection. These mental and emotional efforts create a deeper attachment than simple availability ever could. Men value things that require effort, attention, and thought, and your absence forces him to do exactly that. Desire is no longer a casual feeling. It becomes an active pursuit of understanding, connection, and reassurance. At the same time, uncertainty awakens a sense of respect for boundaries. Men often need challenges to recognize significance. When you stop reaching out, you are not playing games. You are demonstrating self-respect and independence. That boundary, combined with the uncertainty it creates, teaches him that you are not to be taken for granted. Respect and desire often go hand in hand. By creating space, you allow him to see your worth without reminders or prompts, which strengthens his attraction and admiration. Over time, this heightened desire also forces a man to confront his priorities. He may ask himself whether he is willing to make an effort, whether he values the connection enough to pursue it sincerely, and whether he is ready to demonstrate commitment. The absence of your attention is like a mirror reflecting his true intention. Uncertainty forces him to define what he feels and what he is willing to act on. Men rarely reach this level of clarity when attention is constant, because constant attention reduces urgency, and urgency drives meaningful emotional engagement. Ultimately, stopping communication and creating uncertainty triggers a mental and emotional process that cannot be rushed. Desire emerges not because of manipulation, but because the mind and heart are given space to recognize value, reflect on significance, and evaluate priorities. When a man is uncertain, he cannot take things lightly. He begins to weigh your presence against absence, action against inaction, and superficial attraction against genuine attachment. Uncertainty ignites focus, reflection, and desire, making him realize on his own that the connection he has with you is rare, meaningful, and worth pursuing actively. This process is subtle but powerful. Every thought he has during your absence, every reflection on memories, every mental evaluation of his feelings strengthens the emotional pull. Your absence is not a punishment or attested as a catalyst for desire. By stepping back, you allow him to experience the natural process of realizing what he values most, and that realization often leads to stronger emotional investment than constant attention ever could. Desire, fueled by uncertainty, awakens the mind to the importance of your presence and creates a deeper, more genuine connection that cannot be forced but emerges naturally from introspection and awareness. When you stop reaching out, the final shift that takes place in a man's mind is the revelation of true intentions through action. Silence does not confuse a serious man. It reveals who he really is. Men, by nature, are less verbal than women when it comes to expressing emotion, and often their feelings are shown more through deeds than words. When your attention, messages, or calls are consistently available, it is easy for a man to become passive. He knows that your care is constant, and he may take it for granted without ever being fully tested. But when you step back and stop reaching out, you remove the safety net. You create a space where thought turns into action, and internal desire must meet external behavior. In that space, a man's true intentions become clear, because action is the only measure of what he truly values. At first, he may react with confusion or even irritation. He might wonder why you stopped initiating contact, and he may debate in his mind whether he should reach out or wait for you to break the silence. That internal dialogue is important because it forces him to examine his own motives and desires. When there are no messages from you to respond to, he has to consider the value of your presence independently. This absence becomes a mirror, reflecting his feelings and his willingness to act. A man may feel challenged, and that challenge ignites evaluation. He begins to ask himself, sometimes subconsciously, do I want this connection enough to make an effort? As time passes, the mind moves from reflection to calculation. He begins to consider the consequences of inaction. The longer the silence continues, the more he realizes that in order to maintain or rebuild the connection, he must take deliberate steps. This is crucial because it separates fleeting interest from meaningful intention. Words alone are insufficient. Action becomes the ultimate test of care and commitment. A man who is serious about you will find ways to demonstrate his feelings without needing reminders or prompts. He will reach out thoughtfully, show interest consistently, or make gestures that communicate his priorities. Men who are not serious or fully invested often retreat further into silence or distraction. Their inaction speaks louder than any excuse they could give. This is the clarity that absence provides. When you stop reaching out, you are not manipulating or testing him. You are creating a natural boundary that exposes the truth. His response, or lack thereof, reveals whether he truly values you or whether he has been complacent while your attention was readily available. Action, or the absence of it, becomes the ultimate measure of intention. The process also challenges him to confront responsibility. When you have always reached out, carried conversations, or maintained the emotional connection, he may have relied on your effort to sustain the relationship. Your silence removes that comfort and forces him to take ownership of his feelings and decisions. He must decide if he is willing to invest time, thought, and energy to reconnect or maintain the connection. This decision-making process is not always conscious, but it shapes behavior. Men who care deeply are often motivated to act decisively when they realize their emotional investment is required, whereas men who are indifferent reveal it through continued inaction. Over time, the impact of your absence on his behavior becomes clear. He may begin to make efforts that are more intentional and meaningful than casual attention ever achieved. Perhaps he reaches out with thoughtful messages rather than simple greetings, or he initiates conversations that demonstrate curiosity and engagement. Maybe he plans to see you in person, or takes steps to create shared experiences that matter. Each of these actions is a reflection of internal realization. He has had the time and space to evaluate what is important, and his behavior now aligns with what he values. Silence also strengthens the connection for men who act. By removing the crutch of constant attention, you allow a man to take responsibility for his emotions and intentions. His actions are no longer reactive, they are deliberate. When he initiates meaningful contact after a period of absence, it demonstrates a conscious choice rather than habit. This choice carries more weight than words because it is grounded in effort, awareness, and genuine investment. Men often express love and care most effectively through deliberate actions, and your absence creates the conditions for that expression to emerge naturally. At the same time, inaction during your absence communicates as much as action. Men who do not reach out or show effort reveal their priorities clearly. Silence separates those who are committed from those who are passive or indifferent. Your withdrawal is not punishment, but a mechanism that uncovers truth. By stepping back, you gain clarity about his intentions without needing confrontation or questioning. The patterns of behavior that emerge under these conditions provide insight into what he values, how serious he is, and whether he is willing to invest emotionally in the connection. This process ultimately fosters accountability. A man cannot hide behind convenience or routine when your attention is no longer automatic. He is forced to face the consequences of his choices. If he values you, he will act in ways that reflect respect, care, and investment. If he does not, inaction will reveal that truth. The absence of constant contact creates a natural filter, allowing you to see clearly who is willing to meet you halfway and who is not. Actions, after all, always speak louder than words, and silence makes those actions unmistakable. By stopping outreach, you create a dynamic in which a man's internal desires meet external reality. Reflection, desire, and uncertainty culminate in action, and action is the truest measure of intention. Men may hesitate, struggle, or wrestle with conflicting emotions during your absence, but ultimately their choices reveal who they are and what they truly value. A man who genuinely cares will step up, and the quality of his effort will demonstrate the depth of his feelings. Silence does not manipulate, it clarifies. It shows who is serious, who is invested, and who is willing to act rather than merely exist within a comfortable pattern. In this way, absence is a powerful tool for understanding a man's true intentions. It removes assumptions, exposes priorities, and forces reflection that leads to authentic behavior. When you stop reaching out, you no longer carry the weight of the connection alone. His actions, prompted by your silence, tell the real story of how he feels and whether he is willing to match your investment. In the end, boundaries, respect, and the natural consequences of absence reveal the truth that words alone can never convey.